Okay. So, welcome back, my friend, to The Silent War with your host, Dustin Nemos of nemosnewsnetwork.com and theserapium.com Hidden History Archive. And on this episode, we're going to go through a interesting topic, transgenderism, with my friend Dave. And Dave has been working with me for some time. Many of you may recognize his voice, maybe even his face, from doing a couple of different news episodes back to help me out with some of the bulk that was going on. It was so overwhelming back during the election cycle. He's helped out in many ways behind the scenes as well. He's kind of a tech genius in many ways as well. So Dave had questions about the recent video I did on transgenderism, and we decided to spin up a new format, a new show. We're going to start doing episodes like this where we just kind of go through it and talk about it. So Dave, welcome to the show that you helped build.
Dustin, it's good to talk with you always. So here's the thing. The topic is hot right now. We're seeing Twitter is lit up right now. And you did that video, Sin Wars, a couple of weeks ago. And it went so deep into the religious implications of transgenderism and this indoctrination, all of this. And you don't see anybody talking about that. You see people talking about very superficial things. Oh, it's indoctrination, or it's depopulation, or whatever or too weak in the military. And I've not seen anybody cover the religious implications of it the way you have. And I think it would be great to talk about that, because in the last few days, last few weeks, a lot of people are talking about this subject, and we're seeing it more. Even today, just today, SEAL Team 6, one of the gentlemen who was on SEAL Team 6 that supposedly took out Osama bin Laden is chiming in on it. Is this what I fought in the military for? And now today also on Nemo's News Network, there's an article up that is they're actually using a transgender. They're 8,000 recruits down. Our military is weakened. And their campaign is to bring in a transgender personality for recruitment. That's just crazy. So I thought it would be great to go over some of the ideas that people, I guess, not to use the word normie, but even truther normies are still talking about this as it's just indoctrination. Yeah. Well, if it's indoctrination, why are they going after the children the way they are? Why aren't they in black neighborhoods? Yeah. Lay it out for me. Explain it to me. Help me understand it.
Well, okay, so I can explain this. First of all of those things are true. It is about depopulation and indoctrination and grooming and sex access to children and all of those things. But just like with any crime, you have to understand, or at least try to figure out and investigate the motive. And in this case, the motive happens to be a religious hatred written down in holy books that goes back thousands of years. Through oral traditions. It's a war that has been going on between different tribes for a long time. So we can go into that. As far as, the modern stuff that's happening, it has happened before as well. It happened in Babylon. It happened in Nazi Germany before the Nazis rose to power. In opposition of it, in fact, the books that the Nazis were burning were grooming books geared toward children. So history has been an entire lie. And of course, I can't defend everything they were doing because there was some occult stuff happening. Some of the leadership were into the occult. Some of them were, obsessed with the black arts of witchcraft, essentially. So I don't want to go and defend all of the Nazis, but the people were cheering on a pro-Christian, pro-conservative, pro-nationalist message, basically. And that's what Hitler rose to power on. And that's what he was speaking to. So basically, we've been lied to about all of this. And in order to understand it, we have to go back to the motive. Why is it happening not in China, not in India, not in Africa, but mostly in the West, mostly where the white Christians are? Because this is a religious war, whether you're Christian or not, whether you're white or not. They hate white Christians, and they hate all Christians, especially whites. And it has been going on for a long time. So this agenda, this motive, if you want to find evidence for it, they admit it in many publications. They admit it in their own words in many different ways, and in some cases brag about it. I could point you to the famous example where Jon Stewart on TV was saying blacks should get together with Jews and get whitey. This is just one cultural example, but it's actually in their holy books, the Talmud, which is, I call it Babylon's anti-Bible, basically. It is a counter-Christian theology based on the same God, but where everything that God says is undone. All of the 10 commandments are overruled. Pedophilia is allowed. Bestiality is allowed. Child rape, sorcery, all kinds of evil things are allowed in this book. The things that they say about Jesus are horrible, like he boils in semen in hell and was a sorcerer who raped his donkey. It's evil stuff in this book. Now, beyond that, they actually write in their book things like, if they knew what we write about them, they would kill us. And if they read this book, you should kill them. If they go to court and you're the judge, you should always cheat them. Now, I'm paraphrasing here, but you're starting to see our system in the background. And I think a lot of people have made this connection. Kanye West has made this connection for a lot of people. So I think people are starting to recognize there's an agenda and they hate us. But why do they hate us? So whatever your religious background is, the ancient world, okay, but for those out there maybe who are not, the ancient world in every mythology, you know, and atheists can verify this with the actual forbidden archaeology, which we have as well at the Serapeum, who don't want to believe that giants were real or the elongated skull creatures were real. I know that you know about Star Child and stuff, so I know that you know giants were real, but they've been finding these bones in megalithic structures that we could not have built all over the world, surrounded by like blood sacrifice altars very often. So these creatures, these Nephilim, these giants existed, and they have been at war with humanity, dominating us, enslaving us, eating us in some cases, and pretty much the whole time sacrificing children to demons in the background. It's part of the religion that was open before the flood. And then afterwards, it became a little bit more through initiations only. And then eventually after Christ and what happened there, these things went underground. You didn't see blood sacrifices of people performed in open temples anymore. And that's kind of what they're trying to bring back now. You see this death cult that's coming to power that has a new world order. All the governments are in lockstep, vaccinating and depopulating their people. All of that goes back to the same agenda. The same people behind transgenderism are the same people behind the vaccines, the same people
and who is
behind
that?
the New World Order, the Jews. I know people, they hate to hear it.
You know, that, and that's the thing is that you hear people say that, and there's a lot of people on Twitter that say that as well. But you're saying that in the Talmud and in the religious writings, these things are actually proven. These things are, you can research it and you can find these and make these connections. Yeah. It's a personal opinion. It's like you can go back and reference documented history, which says, you know, this is how they thought. This is their doctrine. This is what they believe. This is the hatred they have for Christians. This is what they say you should do. You know, so these things actually exist in their writings. Is that right?
They have 8 different genders, at least, in their Talmud. And their teenage daughters.
Okay, tell me about that. 8 different genders in the Talmud. I've never heard that. You got to tell me that.
Okay. So you can go and look up, for example, 8 different genders Talmud, and you'll find still for now, I don't know if it's censored in the future, it may be at some point, but you can still find videos of young Jewish women with face paint all over the place, many of them singing the verses and proudly saying and championing the transgender cause. Anywhere you see the transgender cause being championed, it's always them. Same thing with immigration, same thing with porn, same thing with banksterism and usury. It's always them. Same thing with communism. It's always them. Pretty much every organized evil that you look at, it's always them. And they are far overrepresented proportionally in positions of power and evil than the average person. I mean, they make up less than 2% of the population of the world.
That's something
like
that
80% of evil.
That's something that always surprises me because that's true. They make up a very small percentage of the population, but wherever you look, whether it's Big Pharma, whether it's the banks, whether it's Hollywood, whether it's the World Economic Forum, whether it's someone like Yuval Noah Harari with the World Economic Forum, and the things they say, they don't hide it, or they're not hiding it anymore. people, if you listen to the things that Yuval says, they're insane. That's not a normal person. Now you can say that the person's crazy, and well, if they're crazy and they're insane, how did they work themselves into a position so high in the world? Or is there something more? And that's what makes me think. That's what makes me believe. Like, there's more to this. There's a religious aspect. There's something going on. It's spiritual, and that's what it comes to for me. Is that it's spiritual, because you can go back and you can look back. Who controls entertainment? Who controls Hollywood? Okay, so as far as the transgender issue is concerned, you can go back and you can say, okay, I remember RuPaul. I remember when RuPaul was introduced to the scene. Now, you heard things about drag here and there, drag shows. It was always kind of taboo. But then RuPaul came on the scene, and then that became kind of mainstream. And then it became its own show. He had his own show on, I guess, A&E or one of those channels, drag show or whatever it was. And when you look back, that was years ago. And you've seen how it's slowly, this one thing has slowly kind of crept into the mainstream to where it is now. Now, 10 years ago, if, you'd have drag queens dressed up half naked doing pretty much sex shows for children and story times in school libraries, these people would be smoked. They'd be arrested and thrown in jail. But it's just acceptable. And people are like under some spell. The parents are like under some spell. And, when you look at it from that perspective, when I look at it,
it is a spell.
I see spiritual. Yeah. And that's why your show you did, and people need to watch it. People need to go back and watch Sin War. In fact, they need to watch the whole docuseries. And it's like 40 hours. You just take food, take food and water. You're not coming out for a while. Bring a snorkel if you have to. Just, people need to watch it, because, the way you did it, it was fast, and as far as the editing is concerned, I helped you on some of that. And as I was doing that, I found myself like, I got to get this done. And I couldn't, because I end up watching it and I just want to watch it. And I was like, okay, when's the next one coming? Dustin, when's the next one coming? Let me help you edit it, and then just watch it. And it's so captivating. And the way you grabbed all these different clips from different things and put them together, it was a lot of work. I know how much work you put into it. I know how long it took you, and I know how much it means to you. But people need to watch it, because it explains a lot. Things that I never thought about, things that never crossed my mind, that wouldn't have, because I just don't think at that level. I'll say, okay, it's a spiritual war, but that's so superficial. Yeah. It's almost just words, because unless you really look into it, there's no spiritual aspect of it.
So I like to speak, I was an atheist most of my life until I truly tested the Bible and prophecy, and I tested the world science versus real scientism. Scientism versus real science, and scientism being like evolution and global warming and stuff, where they basically faked whole branches of science in order to convince us God is not real. There is a war on God, and it is religious, and it goes back to, from whatever religious or atheist background that you have. I'm going to speak to it from the Christian narrative in a little bit, but basically every mythology on Earth shared pretty much the same story from different perspectives. They all had a flood. They all had a man who survived it with his 3 sons. They all had a serpent or serpents involved. Now, and they all had giants. Many of them were cannibalistic giants, which is the truth. Now, the difference comes in the fact that many of these other mythologies, what we would call like paganism, the other religions out there, actually worshipped these giants as their gods, like the Osiris, the Baal, the Zeus. These were their gods. They ruled over these empires and dominated their empires. And they founded religions to themselves, essentially. They thought themselves gods. And they were, in a sense, a type of demigod. They were a hybrid. They were stronger, bigger, faster, much smarter than us. They had 30% more brain capacity, 6 fingers, 6 toes, double rows of teeth. Goliath was described as such.
Not only Goliath.
Many of them. Yeah, he was a baby by then. That was a late era where they were much, much smaller.
Well,
They were
there's
bigger
stories
than
back
the
into the
pre-flood.
1800s of, was it Lovelock, Nevada? The caves there, the bat caves that were uncovered, right? And they found it, and the Native Americans told stories of redheaded giants with double rows of teeth that were eating the natives, and so they burned them out into a cave and smoked them into the cave and lit it on fire and burned them. And it wasn't until years later in the 1800s, somehow these guys that were mining bat guano for fertilizer came across the cave, and they uncovered all the bones, and they uncovered it all. And of course, the Smithsonian stepped in and poof, gone.
Always. You can go to the Library of Congress and look up records of different types of things and find giants all over the place. They have records of 30 footers
the mounds,
from
right?
The 1500s. The mounds
The
are
giant
actually
mounds
like
in
the North American
Pennsylvania.
giants. They were smaller. Abraham Lincoln mentioned the giants of North America, but they were the small ones. I mean, they were like 10 feet, 12 feet max, as far as I can tell. You had, like, for example, Rockwall, Texas was completely buried because there was a rock wall filled with giant bones there, and they just buried it, or they put it under a lake or something. They built a dam.
Well, it actually extends very far, like many, many, many miles. And, they tried to debunk it as a natural occurrence. It's impossible. And actually, that whole narrative that it's a natural occurrence has been debunked by several very, very knowledgeable people. And when you listen to them explain the actual science of it, it's not a natural phenomenon. It's man-made. Absolutely.
Official science is Swiss cheese. You can poke it full of holes, and it's basically with an agenda to debunk God. It even came, I can show you where it came from. Fake news and science as a strategy, specifically. Fake news itself, perhaps, came from Cardinal Wolsey, and whichever pope that was, right? I forget. The Roman Church, the Catholic false Church of Christ, which is, it has nothing to do
involved
with biblical teachings. But the Church of Rome, which has been controlled by the Jews since Nero and Julius Caesar, basically put out learning against learning as a strategy. The Pope approved it. Cardinal Wolsey invented it. And then they decided to flood the world with false data in science. The encyclopedia came out of this eventually.
Right. So and then they burned down the library of Alexandria, and they burned all the records, the Hall of Records, so that there would only be their scientism, right?
Yeah. The ancient world was lost to us until the internet as a people. Now, because of, many people's works, and I've kind of gathered them together at the Serapeum, you can basically connect the dots, and you can bring all of the experts from various areas and completely decimate their so-called science, their so-called history. Right. It turns out, and I'm going to give you the biblical Christian narrative, which I believe to be the truth, and I believe it to be the only holy book on earth that can test and be proven. For example, things like prophecies and some of the other divine codes that are hidden in there that are way beyond human ability to do. Anyway, so I'm just going to go with the Christian narrative. In the pre-flood world, in the beginning, there was Adam and Eve, and then there was a serpent which tricked Eve and Adam into learning about basically the knowledge of good and evil is how it's described. Now, there's a couple ways to look at this. One of those is we learned about the war of good and evil. We learned about those two things, and then we were suddenly able to be one of those things. So now we have a mortal life, and we get a contest. We have to prove which side we're going to be on, basically, ever since that point. But they were immortal, and that serpent was punished to have a war between its offspring and her offspring. Now, this part of the Bible right there at the beginning, very few Christians pay attention to. There is an offspring of the Satan, the serpent.
You never hear anybody talk about that.
No. And this is the beginning of the seed war, the Genesis 3:15 event. Now, that's the tree. That's the punishment, the curse, perhaps the first curse in the Bible, I think. And then Genesis 6, just a little bit later, but a couple of hundred years later, during the days of Jared, one of Adam's descendants. I think it's about the 7th generation. I could be wrong. And they had long lives. But, anyway, back to my point. Genesis 6, the B'nai Ha-Elohim, in Hebrew, the sons of God, the fallen angels, came to earth, saw the sons or the daughters of Eve. They had the long, beautiful hair, thought they were fair to look upon, and then took them for wives. Now, fast forward just a little bit, all flesh is corrupted. There has to be a flood to wipe out the giants. That's how bad it got. That's how quickly it happened.
how did these giants who were massive, how were they able to have offspring with comparatively small women? I mean, I don't want to,
I get that question. Yeah. I get that. That's a giant FAQ at this point. The answer is they start the same size. They go through a slightly faster growth pattern until puberty, and then they take off, and then they never stop puberty. Their growth inhibitor gene is turned off, just like a liger today. And that liger will grow to be the size of a tank, and it will keep growing until it dies. And it will always be hungrier and hungrier and hungrier every single day. And it will out-eat 10 or 20 other lions. It could probably kill 10 or 20 other lions at once. That's how powerful a liger becomes. That is what happened to the giants, except their lifespan was not 20 years or something like a liger. It was 500 years. 500 years of puberty and starvation.
But we're also presupposing that their anatomy is right. But we're presupposing that these Nephilim, that their anatomy is comparable to a man. It may have been different. There may have been, something that allowed that kind of the copulation between, the Nephilim and human women.
Maybe they lay eggs.
Well, no, I don't mean that, but I mean that their body, their makeup of their body was their anatomy was such that they were able to actually procreate. That it was not like, hey, these big giant men are able to, to copulate with.
Well, you have to think about, what were their teenage years like? They were going to be big, strong, impressive, able to rape or, earn or whatever. They were going to be like the royal blood, the demigods of their time. A woman wouldn't have had a choice anyway to say no.
True.
And up until a certain point, it would still work. Maybe when they were 15,
I guess
20 feet,
you could say that.
The death rate goes up. And at that point, maybe they are sexually frustrated because it just never works again, because they can never find another woman unless it's a giant woman, which also happened. I mean, they had giant women too. So, they had the ability to sort of stay within their own tribes and keep the bloodline pure, which some of them chose to do. You saw a lot of that with the more royal bloodlines. Even today, you see the royal families, mostly Jewish infiltrated, keeping the blood pure, trying to keep their fallen angelic DNA as pure as possible. Now, in essence, what happened around the days of Noah was all flesh had become corrupted, not only from the giant gene, but also from mankind having learned genetic manipulation from these fallen angels. It doesn't just come with an explosion of genetic manipulation. When they started to come to Earth, they started to teach us everything from abortion to warfare, to making jewelry, to making weapons, to using makeup, everything that they could use to destroy us. They hated us right from the beginning. So they taught us all of these horrible things, and there was an explosion in sin and in technology. And by the time of the days of Noah, humanity was genetically experimenting with animals, birds, fish, insects. They were sinning against the flesh, as God puts it, of these different types of beings. And all flesh had become corrupted. So God took what little was left, pure genetics from his creation, and he flooded the rest. Yes, the boat was big enough to hold all the animals with plenty of extra space. Most of them were babies. Anyway, so moving on to the next part, the giants came back. This is another thing that many Christians struggle with. Some people call it the second incursion theory, thinking that more angels came and did the same thing again. Their first angels were imprisoned and punished for this, according to scripture. And this also aligns with some stuff that's happening now with the return of aliens and all that stuff, which is a whole different topic. Aliens are the fallen angels returned for the last battle. And that's why things have, again, exploded in genetic corruption and technology and sin, once again, since the 50s. But in essence, the flesh was corrupted. God flooded the world. The giants came back. And the answer to that riddle is Ham, one of the sons of Noah, who was a sinful son, had married a pre-flood woman. All three sons had. And that was all flesh corrupted. He had married a Nephilim, a giant, but she wasn't a giant yet. She was young. She was beautiful. She was intelligent. And he had no choice. They were either going to have three boys, mom and dad, and no procreation, no family for the rest of history. And that's the end of the human race, or they were going to bring these women over. So they
So there were
saved
three
three
sons. There were
genetically.
three sons. Is that right? So there was Noah, then he had three sons,
Yep.
Seth, um, uh,
Shem, Ham, and Japheth.
that's right. Okay. And so it was Ham. Was the only son that came together with the Nephilim, or his wife was a descendant of the Nephilim.
They were sisters, actually, the three, apparently.
What?
So all three had genetic corruption. Now, the riddle, this is a deep riddle, and it involves one of God's rules, and God works through things like genetics. We can prove this. And I didn't understand this riddle until I understood epigenetics. If a murderer has a child, there's a scar that will pass from his murder on his DNA to his child's DNA. It's a genetic scar. God punishes the offspring to the third and fourth generation of them that hate him, which means they don't follow his law. And he rewards those who love him to the 1,000th generation. And there are blessings and things like, for example, the ability to digest milk, I believe, is one of those blessings. Not all tribes have that. Some people are lactose intolerant.
That's so dogmatic, though.
Right?
But
so there are
generations. What did I do?
Yeah. Well, there's different blessings and different people groups and different histories. And the Bible is sort of the history book of the races, in a sense. And I'm not, picking favorites here. I'm just saying, like, for example, Ishmael came out of Abraham, and that was the father of the Islamic and Arab nations. And there are many of them because they had a blessing to be as numerous as the sea, just like Abraham's children would. So you basically got this.
When you say that God has these rules and that you're basically three generations cursed, but those are God's laws. These are the laws of God that people aren't taught. Nobody's taught these things, right? Is that what you're saying?
They're not. And it's not until you reach a very high level of understanding in a specific scientific field, such as genetics or cosmology, until you really start to appreciate that God has a hand in science. Like, quantum physics, all of these things that they're discovering now, they're running up against a scientific wall where they can't explain anything without saying there's a God, a creator. And God works through science. He works through genetics. He works through these things. And it's kind of beautiful. And for example, Yahweh is numerically written on our genetic profile. It's on our DNA.
Right.
He wrote his name on our DNA like an artist. And when you start to look into these different things, you can see genetic evidence that the world is 6,000 years old, mitochondrial Eve, and the rate of acceleration and all of that just debunks all of the official genetics. Evolution, there's no missing link whatsoever. Millions of monkey bones, millions of man bones, none of that other stuff in the middle made out of clay. And all of these lies that they've told us. So if you start to really go into the science and the scientific method, especially if you know about biblical Earth, then you start to put this network together. Anyway, so God works through genetics. We've got the giants; they're back. Fast forward, most of the evil from human history has been them waging war against us. Now, they kept getting smaller as they bred with humanity, and their genetics became less pure. As you can see, the giants got smaller and the elongated skulls got smaller over time. And then, like, the North American giants were 12-footers, where their ancestors were 30-plus footers. So the genes got weaker, and then also their numbers thinned out. There's only about 2% of the world or less of them now. The Nephilim, the hybrids that hate humans, that religiously teach in their holy books that we, mankind, are not human, but we are like insects to them. That 1,000 of us could die before one of their fingernails gets cracked or something like that. It's insane, and it's evil, and it's a genetic hatred that stems back to the seed war, Genesis 3:15.
That's interesting.
War between the seed of the serpent and the seed of the woman. They can't help it, and they were behind the fall of Rome. They were behind the fall of Hellenic Greece. They have wiped out over 50% of white people in the last 100 years using 3 or 4 different wars alone. I mean, I'm not even going into the full numbers, including COVID, anything else. They were the Black Plague. It was not a plague. They were putting poison in Christian wells. They have been kicked out of almost 200 nations because there were multiple sometimes, but for poking holes into little kids and draining their blood in bizarre rituals, like Saint Simon of Trent, a famous example, where the Catholic Church is sort of like backtracking now, where they don't want to admit it because it's anti-Semitic. They're not even Semitic. They're not from Shem. They're from Ham.
Perpetual victimhood. It's anti-Semitic. Yeah. But, it's interesting because when you go back, so I was just thinking about this, is that, you said that they had gotten smaller, not as large, the small ones in North America, the giants that you're referring to. Then even in places like Paracas, you see these Paracas mummies that have these giant elongated skulls, and some of the work from some of the researchers, the skulls, it's like the genetics, they are not Homo sapiens sapiens. They are a different species.
Homo capensis.
Red hair, red, like these sauries from the ancients, and red hair, not two rows of teeth, but their jaws, their mandibles are massive, and their bone structures. Brian Foster, I think his name is, and the skulls, and even the sutures, where we have a normal coronal suture, their sutures in their bone plates in their skull are different, but the volume is there. They're not elongated by boarding. Artificially, these are massive, and the bone, massive. And even it goes back when you look back in time, like Cleopatra. Was it Cleopatra, or was it Imhotep, or Akhenaten? Akhenaten. He had an elongated skull and a very pear-shaped body, very unusually shaped body. But these people, and what's interesting is the Paracas. The only other place that they found skulls that are similar to that is in Ukraine, in the Black Sea. And they're actually of the same gene type, genotyping, or the same hapla, which is totally interesting. But you look at those people, they were smaller people, but their heads were still massive, and their jaws and their features. So something happened in the genetics for sure. And it seems to line up. It seems to line up with the stories of history. Now, what they were, because people know, but nobody knows. And you look at the structures there, like in Peru. You look at the structures, like in Pumapunku and Tiwanaku and these places. They're incredible. They're
we can't build.
Pumapunku is my favorite, all-time favorite. So some very ancient high technology had to exist. Now, when you say that the Nephilim, they taught people about gold and making jewelry and science and genetics and all these things, they had the skill, they had the knowledge. And then as time went on, they ended up perhaps in different places. Maybe those are descendants of the Nephilim in Peru, Paracas.
It is, and they call them Homo capensis because science is beginning to kind of admit it now. I'm moving my cord around here, these sorts of things are not really hidden that well anymore. Mainstream History Channel shows like Ancient Aliens and History Channel itself have done specials proving that giant bones exist, and they're being covered up all over the world. I mean, there are ancient pyramids in pretty much every country on Earth, even China, for example.
Right, China.
These things were able to build incredible structures because of their massive strength, because they were indeed giants.
Bosnia.
But basically, as recent as I think maybe you saw this a couple months ago, there was a Notre Dame fire, and then they did kind of an exhumation under it, and they found an elongated skull knight. He was not a giant, but he still had the pointy head. And then Maximus Thrax of Rome, a Roman emperor, was 15-something feet tall. So, this is all over the historical record. Mainstream historians, even like Josephus, that the mainstream respect, mentioned these giants. So it's not hidden that well. It's just in the last 500 years or so, what I believe is linked to the biblical great deception, scientism itself, the invention of all this fake science to lead us away from God, to tell us the world is ancient, that it's a cannonball covered in water shooting through space and twirling, and the stars still line up the same every day. And or every year. And then you've got all of these other lies that they've told us to lead us away from God, like we've mentioned before. And it's just so easy to destroy those lies. And then we have to rebuild. And when you start to rebuild based on what we know, the historical record, the scientific method, everything comports to pretty much all of the ancient religious texts that agree on the fundamental aspects of what happened in Genesis. So everything reinforces God. Science proves God. Science did not kill God. Scientism tried to kill God and failed. But the result was a great falling away from faith. And now you have nihilism. Now you have atheism, which was written by the Freemasons as part of their World War III plan. Create nihilistic and atheistic conditions and unleash hell on the world so that the Christians and the fundamentalists would revolt and fight back. And they are plotting just like World War I and II, which they wrote beforehand.
Right.
Then they're plotting to make World War III happen right now.
So that's where we are now.
It's going to be a meat grinder. Yeah, everything that they've written, they don't have the ability to actually create prophecies. They can't do specific dates, but they've been making plans since the Tower of Babel fell. I mean, King Nimrod from the Tower of Babel from ancient Babylon founded the Freemasons. They won't shut up about him in their own writings. The occult are obsessed with him. They're actually trying to bring him back. We invaded Iraq 3 months after they found his body. We pulled the body out. First thing we did, and all of the cuneiform tablets in the museum that we stole were related to resurrection technology. And then suddenly the CIA branches of investment, like the In-Q-Tel and the DARPA and stuff, are investing in companies that want to resurrect ancient mammoths. And then suddenly we have mammoth meatballs being resurrected. It's getting very close to the resurrection.
We should talk about that sometime. A lot of people, they don't know what happened in Iraq with the museums. Many people have no idea what took place. And
they found a weapon of mass destruction
in the Sumerian museums. And it's incredible. And you see the footage. It surprises me how many people don't know. But then again, how many people don't know a lot about, conspiracies that are just like mainstream now, I mean, it seems like COVID's waking up a lot of people. COVID seems to have been woken up a lot of people in that regard.
Yeah.
But, one thing that's interesting is that, so they hate religion. Their whole motive is to hate Christians. But here's one thing that I saw somebody mention on Twitter was that you don't see these drag queen story times and these drag queen performances in Black neighborhoods. And I thought about that. I was like, I can't say that I've actually seen that. That seems to be accurate because all the videos I see, they tend to be in like pretty much white neighborhoods. That's not saying that there's no Black people there, but they don't appear to be in Black neighborhoods. This is, you see a lot in Texas where it's predominantly white neighborhoods. So why would you think that they're specifically targeting what appears to be targeting Caucasians rather than, because Black people are very religious, very religious people. So if they hate God and that's part of the agenda, why not target all of the religious groups? Why just the Anglo-Saxon groups? Why just the Caucasian groups?
It's a painful answer people may or may not want to hear, and I'm going to just tell the truth and not be politically correct. I'm going to preface it, though. I do have an Asian.
Well, I'm asking. I want to know if you know the answer. Tell me. I'll handle the hard answers.
The key word there, Anglo-Saxon, the word Saxon. It's funny. I trace my lineage back to Isaac through that word Saxon. It actually stands for Saxon, Isaac's sons, Saxon. So Isaac's sons became the Saxons. Basically, the lost tribes of Israel from the Bible became the Western nations, the Christian nations of Europe, America, Britain, Australia, and so forth, Canada as well. So the Caucasian tribe of Israel, not all Caucasians are part of this tribe, but the Caucasian tribe of Israel are primarily who they are at war with. Now, Israel goes back to the biblical Jacob. And Jacob had a brother named Esau. Esau, God hated before he was even born for some reason. And I believe it was because he was kind of a jerk, a barbarian, a murderer, a rebel. He didn't honor his family. He tried to kill his own brother a couple times. And ultimately, his greatest sin, perhaps, was marrying into the Canaanites. And later, his tribe repeated that sin, marrying into the Hittites on Mount Seir. So Esau had a war with his brother Jacob throughout his life. And Jacob, through divine hand, I guess, and his mother's suggestion, got the inheritance from his father, despite being the younger son. Esau was a bad kid, just like Ham. And Esau mixed with the giants. And then Esau's people became what we know as Edom, or Edomites, mentioned in the end times, mentioned in the book of Obadiah, when it says that the tribes of Jacob will wipe them out 100%, not a single
These like Edomites, like Canaanites. These are also Canaanites, or referred to as Canaanites.
Canaanites came from Canaan, which was a son of Ham. So you go back, and Canaan had most of the giants in his bloodline, more than all of Ham's other children combined. All of Canaan's children were giants, and so forth. There's a reason for that. and I believe it goes back to a document in the Talmud called the Will of Canaan. It's the only place it survived. But the Will of Canaan was a living will and testament, just like today, for his children, and containing basically 5 instructions to lie, steal, cheat, and kill all your neighbors. Never, ever be a good servant, basically. And that was a response to Noah having cursed Ham that his son Canaan would be a servant to his brothers. So rather than be a servant to his brothers, Canaan said, you're going to kill and cheat everyone else forever. And his family had all the giants.
You made a
genetic curse. God
you
cursed
made an infographic that was really good. I remember you sent it to me and you needed help making it bigger, or you needed help with something. I remember looking at it and thinking, wow, I never knew any of this. And, I had to stop and study it for a while. People should look at that. What is it? Serapium.com /
Which one?
The map where it shows the 2 trees and it shows the lineage.
I can pull it up. Yeah. Keep talking. I'll pull it up in the background. It's on the lineage article. So if you go to theserapium.com /map and go down to the lineage section, it'll be on the main lineage articles, and it's a pretty big high res one. I'm going to pull it up in my files now from the creation file. Yep. There's one of them. Let's see. Keep talking while I find this.
Do I need to share the screen for you?
I think I can share screen. I'm hosting. I should be able to share it. I've got one of them. Let's see. It's not the full one, but it'll work for now. We can discuss it.
I had never seen that anywhere.
Pull up the webpage.
You hear the names Jacob, you hear Ham, you hear Seth, you hear Noah, you hear Adam, you hear all the stories, you hear Canaanites, you hear Edomites, you hear all of these things. Yeah, that's it. That's it. That's the one.
It's one of them. Yeah.
Yes,
this is I use this one before I get. This is the early part I use in the docuseries because I blur it out because we're not there yet. And I was going through the creation and the fallen angels part, but you can kind of see what happened. And on the left here, you can still see the part about, Jacob, Israel, and Esau, Edom, and how that goes over to the right to the tree from the fallen genetics. But basically what we're looking for is the survival of the Nephilim in the historical record. Right. Now, a lot of Christians say the giants were wiped out, but it doesn't say that in the Bible. It says some survived, some were remaining and were allowed to remain by Joshua and the tribes. They taxed them instead of killing them like God told them to. God said, leave nothing alive, even the children, which gave me a lot of reason. It gave me a lot of pause.
But the Bible,
for a long time in my life, just as an atheist, my whole life, I had a problem with a God that would kill children. Like, why are Christians into this genocidal maniac God that wipes out man, woman, and child, whole tribes for no reason? Why did he flood the world? Until you find out about the genetic corruption. I would burn down my garden to get rid of a weed if it was destroying all my other weeds. Not because I hate my garden, but because I have to protect the soil. I have to protect the land. I have to get rid of that blight. So, it's the same situation as any other farmer. If there's a genetic corruption, if there's if something got in and raped your cow and it wasn't a cow, you got to get rid of that thing because it's not going to be natural. And those kind of things happen if you're not, look up geeps. You can have a goat sheep called a geep. They're weird. So we don't want that kind of things to happen generally, but neither does God. It was not made in his image. It was a mutant, a hybrid, and God tried to get rid of it for his people's protection because he knew they would grow up to eat babies and eat people.
But
in essence, so
the giants are heavily mentioned in the book of Enoch, and the book of Enoch is completely left out of the Bible, and that's a whole nother topic.
Yeah.
It's a whole nother topic, but it's open there. Where does it say that these giants were eliminated, or where were they removed from the stories? They weren't, and you're not.
They weren't.
You don't focus on. They don't focus on it. It's like distractions, and then when you see this illustration that you made, it kind of pieces it together, and you say, that was it. Like, okay, so that's how it makes sense. That's how the seed, the corruption. That's how it actually makes sense. When you see that illustration, it lines it up.
Yeah, and this is another really good one that. I recently found, I added the section at the bottom that's in black and white. And this kind of this was my path to figuring out the truth of who the Nephilim were in the modern era. I knew that they had survived. I knew that the deep state is obsessed with these giants. They're obsessed with resurrecting Nimrod, the giant. They're worshiping, to a sense, Nimrod. He's more like their role model king. He's their king of their occult world, but they want to be like him. They want to be gods like him. They want to be as gods. That, it all goes back to that original line. So they're trying to get into transhumanism now. They're trying to upgrade their bodies. They're trying to genetically improve themselves. They're trying to become super soldiers or AI brains or whatever now. All of that goes right back to the same line, you shall be as gods. But anyway, I followed all of these different conspiracies, and then I eventually figured out who the Nephilim were. But the Bible, is pretty clear on this, as is the historical record. The giants were mostly wiped out in the flood. All these ancient civilizations like Atlantis and Pumapunku and all these others, blown around the map by a massive, massive eruption from in the middle of the ocean, where there are still mountain ranges paralleling our above ground mountain ranges that are still leaking hot water, constantly venting. Those erupted with such force that it basically sent a plume of water into the upper atmosphere, which froze. And then that cold water descended and became Antarctica. That used to be green, lush land. So now it's all covered in a thick sheet of ice because of the floodwaters, hitting it. Probably a bunch of, like whale bones and stuff in there too, I would imagine. Basically, that set the stage for the modern world. All of the events of the Bible play out, but basically the element and the theme within the Bible, and this is a big part of what they took out, those other books that were originally in the King James Bible and originally in the Christian libraries, like the Dead Sea Scrolls. When you put those back in, you get more context. But even in the mainstream 66 KJV books, the story of the giants, which never died out, is a mainstream element. People try to, they try to turn it into a metaphor for big personalities, basically. But that's not how they're described. They're described as man-eating 12-foot plusers, 30-foot plusers in some cases, that had 6 fingers and 6 toes. They were evil. So this is also, by the way, where we get the origin of demons, which weren't really a thing before the giants. But then after the giants, which were not made in God's image and their spirits were not natural, started to die off in mass, then you started to get demons everywhere in the New Testament, being cast into pigs, being cast out of people all over the place, because these spirits have nowhere to go. They are still wandering around creating trouble. Every time a Nephilim dies, it becomes a demon, even today. So
it always fascinates.
I equate them to living demons.
It always fascinates me with most Christians when they get the Bible is everything to them. The religion is everything to them. And I can't say that I'm a very religious person, but I have a relationship with God. I consider myself a Christian. I was born Catholic. I don't practice. That's a whole nother thing. But when it comes to these things like the giants in the Bible, it's metaphoric. Well, what makes you think God was being metaphoric? Or, he separated the waters from the waters. Where did God say he was being metaphoric? Where did Yahweh say he was being metaphoric? That he was speaking metaphorically? What makes you think that he was speaking metaphorically? And when you bring that up, and like right now in Twitter, there's a lot going on with like flat Earth or true Earth or biblical Earth, and you see him say that, well, it was just metaphoric or it wasn't literal, but so you either take it as the literal word of God or you don't. But
yeah.
Otherwise, you're deciding what is right or what God meant or what his intentions were, or what he was insinuating. And there should be. He wasn't insinuating anything. He was telling you straight out, this is what it is. This is how many days it took me. There were giants. They were big. They were nasty.
People refuse to believe that the Bible can be rewritten, as China is rewriting the Bible now. God even says there are curses for those who do it. That means it is possible. And it has been done. There have been changes. They took out the name of God, Yahweh, over 6,000 times in the modern Bibles, and they put in the Lord, which is English for Baal.
Yeah, like
basically
Lord
slave
or
ruler.
God, but the actual name is Yahweh, or
Yeah,
like the name Yeshua. And then
yeah.
you'll see people say, don't say Yeshua, it's evil. The name is Jesus.
When
And then there's a whole controversy in that too.
yeah. So when you go back in history, who took the Bible? Who took God out of the Bible? The Jews had a hand in that. Who
Yeah,
had
I've
the hand
seen
in
that.
taking these books out of the Bible? According to Tertullian, the Jews didn't like the book of Enoch because it talked about Christ. Therefore, it got taken out of the Bible. According
Right.
to people like Augustus, certain things had to be interpreted metaphorically rather than literally. According to people like Marcion, there is no law anymore. We don't have to follow God's law anymore. That's all done away with. That's not true, by the way. God's law is eternal, and the whole Bible is about people who followed the law and tried to get you to follow the law so much they would die for it, including Christ, who came back to fulfill the law in the hearts and minds of mankind. He died so that we would remember the law. And people say, oh, he died so we don't have to follow it anymore, which makes no sense. And I'm
No.
not picking on anyone. Everyone, when they're born into this world, has a pair of limited blind or vision goggles, the kind that kids have with the little picture thing that keeps moving, strapped to their head, just strapped on. And then they have to pry that off throughout the rest of their life. They have to see the truth. They have to get those fake goggles out of their way and not see the Bible through that lens. And that's the problem with the modern people today is they have bought into the sciences and they've accepted certain parts of Babylon's lies. And now they're susceptible to all of her attacks. So if you don't know the truth about biblical earth, there's no way you can stand on God's word in a literal sense and debate it, because any atheist, like the last 500 years, will pick on you for believing in a flat earth book. And then they'll go through it and they'll take you to task for all the things that you're rejecting from your own Bible, like I would do as an atheist who used to debate Christians for fun all the time. So, how can you defend the Bible if you won't even, believe what God said over people like Fauci today? Fauci is science. He even said it. The UN says we own science. I mean, they're right.
Yeah, it's
they
insane.
do. We can't trust it.
No,
So,
absolutely not. If there's anything that we've learned in the last 3 years, is that it's all nonsense, and which is interesting because how at this
here's
point,
why, by the way. Go ahead.
Yeah, how at this point can people have any faith in what science tells us, or they believe that it's all corrupted and it's all nonsense, and except for this one thing over here, this one thing, no, they're telling the truth about like the moon landing. Oh, no, everything, they lie about everything, but just this one thing is no, this is the truth because they went to the moon and there's footprints and stuff. Apollo 11. I mean, they don't stop to think like how these guys like sit there and not use the bathroom for days, and what they do, poop in their suits, pee in their suits on the way to the moon, and what they do afterward. People don't think about the simple things, like the very, very simple things. Can you imagine being strapped inside of Apollo 11 for how many weeks was it?
How many times now have NASA astronauts almost drowned because their helmets began to fill up with water?
Yeah, well, yeah. There's so much. It's such that would be fun to do a show and talk about NASA. There's so much there, and it's lit up now.
Their logo. Just look at their logo. It's the snake tongue speaking through a flat disc, folks. Yeah. And we know what a serpent's forked tongue is for. It's for deceiving. And NASA is very close to a Hebrew word for deceive anyway. This image here, basically, you could extrapolate this for religion or for science. I use this one to show people kind of truth media versus actual truth media versus the actual truth media that knows the hidden history. So if you go look at the top left corner here, you see some pretty well-known faces like Ben Shapiro and Elon Musk, who are never going to step outside of that box. They are part of the controlled opposition. They're part of the voices that you're supposed to trust that will never say who's behind it, and they'll never tell you the agenda or the motive. They'll talk about the vaccines. They'll talk about the censorship. They'll talk about the immigration, the war, everything else. They will never tell you the lowest common denominator is always the Jews, and Israel is behind all of it. If you get a little further than that, you get past what we call the Great Judeo-Con Wall. No such thing as Judeo-Christian, by the way. That makes no sense. They're opposites. Judaism is actually younger than Christianity, and in response to Christianity as a denial of Christ. I mean, the whole religion of Judaism is based on the denial of Christ and pretending to follow God's law. They follow the Talmud, not the Torah. Anyway, you get past that, you see some pretty familiar faces like Kanye West, Nick Fuentes, Andrew Torba from Gab, who I like. I mean, he's a free speech guy. And also Red Elephants, I forget his name. These guys are just a small example. There are many of them out there who are trying their best to tell the truth and connect the dots. Although I don't trust Nick and Kanye at all. I think they're controlled opposition. But many independent media folks out there are trying their best to figure out why and explain these things. And they're doing a good job at explaining what's happening. They don't know why it's happening. You get a little further than that. You get past, for example, Tom McDonald music, and you get into like Destiny Lab music, which I hate. I hate it. I don't like their sound at all. But their lyrics, I mean, they know as much as I do about human history. Right? It's incredible that these two musicians have the kind of understanding that they have. They understand the Nephilim. They understand the hidden history. They understand where the mythologies came from, all of these giant worship and stuff. These guys have an incredible history understanding. And I put my face there as well because I don't know anyone else who knows all of these things that's trying to connect this. But this is the truth of the political spectrum if you include the hidden history, like what the Catholic Church has done to Christianity, the Dark Ages, killing people for reading the Bible, like the so-called aliens, which are actually fallen angels returned according to prophecy for the end times to play out, like the return of Jesus, which, as I said, prophecy and all of that playing out right now, the book of Revelations, the time of tribulation. There are red alerts all over the place. I know people think this is an unpopular thing to say sometimes, but we have about 11 years left according to God's word. And there are dozens of markers pointing toward it, things that are very strange, like the Euphrates River draining, animals going in circles all over the world, like the time of Noah. All kinds of weird stuff is happening. I think people can kind of see some of these things, like the third temple being built, the alignment in the stars, the woman of Revelation. All of these things have happened or are happening. So we're pretty much there. We're only waiting for the two witnesses at this point, and we're all on for all of the end times markers. They don't know about the Nephilim. You can see a little picture of Jacob Rothschild there, I think, with a Nephilim skull beside him. They don't have as much brain capacity, but they still think they're smarter than us. And they still have all that evil money because, as Jesus said, Satan is God of this world. They worship him, and he has all the money. They don't understand the biblical earth in many cases. We're starting to see people wake up to flat. And flat is a big truth, but flat is only part of it. Flat within a enclosed snow globe on a stationary, non-moving planet, not a water-covered cannonball shooting through space and twirling, right, but a stationary geocentric planet that is the center of the universe, not moving, fixed, young. It's 6,000 years old. We can prove this a number of ways, genetically, also through helium dating, for example. Carbon dating is completely debunked. Like
it's just metaphoric.
We have a firmament. Yeah, we have a firmament.
Just metaphoric.
I use this as just as a way to share quickly the controlled media paradigm. It's the same way in religion. You got the TV pastor saying God wants you to be rich, and they're preaching prosperity doctrine.
Mega church.
And most of those are Jews, and they actually have a document in their past from the Grand Satrap of Constantinople that later became the Protocols of Zion. They deny it, and it was intercepted by the Bavarian government, who warned other governments about it. Anyway, we fast forward to today. This Protocols of Zion talks about how they will infiltrate Christianity as lawyers to put us under the yoke of the law and become judges and lawyers, as medical professionals to poison us and kill us, and as theologians and pastors and priests in order to deceive us and take us away from God's law. This is part of their plan. It's been going on for hundreds of years, and they've done it. We're there. Everything they want has happened, and now they're moving for the final takedown of all white people. They're going to kill every white person on earth if they get their way. It won't happen. Prophecy's clear on who wins. The time of Obadiah and Jacob's wrath is coming, which basically says they're wiped out. But they're trying to wipe out all white people. They have been for some time. And the reason for that is original mankind, the seed of the serpent versus the seed of the woman. We're Caucasian. I know that's controversial for people, but examples are all of the pyramids all over the world, like in China, filled with redheaded and blonde mummies. There's no denying it. Yeah. It's just where the world came from. So again, Asian wife, Asian kids, I'm not picking favorites here. So this is the hidden history of the world. And
it shouldn't be taboo
what's going on now.
it shouldn't be taboo, or it shouldn't be like that when you're talking about these things. People shouldn't be so sensitive about that. I know why they are. I get why they are, but they shouldn't be, because our history's been so screwed and so corrupted.
It's the golden strategy.
We don't know. Yeah, we don't know. So the only thing that we have is the Word of God. We have the Bible. We have the Scriptures, and we have the things that we can see with our own eyes and test.
We actually have a lot.
Yeah.
We have a lot of things people don't want to look at. We have the genetic evidences on our side, the archaeological, the anthropological, the etymological, the religious, the historical. We have all of the actual evidence. We have the scientific method just blowing holes in their fake science all over the place, in the vaccine, the global warming, the historical, the cosmological, everywhere. It's just getting destroyed, decimated.
But it's
and they're
just
trying to kill us off before we wake up.
It's so hard to break through to people on those topics because the indoctrination has been so heavy for so long. The last 3 years has changed a lot. But it still comes down to that thing. Well, they lie about everything, but not this thing or not that thing. And, I think people need to a lot of people I know, they need to let go. They just need to let go and just, everything is a conspiracy until proven otherwise, Oh, do you think this is a conspiracy? Okay, great. Perfect. Okay. Leave it that way until you prove that it's not. Because the last 3 years have pretty much been that way.
Yeah, I agree. People can check this out at theserapium.com/map, where I kind of connect the dots on all these different high-level conspiracies, what's going on.
You have to study this.
Antarctica.
Dustin, you have to study this. Eventually you should make it better because the images and stuff, and it's a little bit confusing, but when you stop and you study it, you actually stop and study it and look at it and follow the arrows, it makes good sense in the end. So that's the thing. When I look at this the first time, I was like, yeah, but it's so hard to follow. And then, okay, so let me just zoom in. Okay, I see. And then it starts, you follow the pattern, you start to see it. So it's really good. The ideas behind it. Maybe one of these days I should help you redo it.
I could use some.
I think you've asked before. I'm like, oh, come on.
I'm really not much of an artist. I'm going to share this image because I want people to see it, and I've got one more I guess I should share as well, because if people want the evidence,
what's important is
extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. This is the link. This is the link. The serapium.com/HisStory. It's the docuseries that you mentioned earlier.
Yeah, the docuseries.
Really I think it's a lot more than 40 hours, by the way. I think Act 12 is 40 hours, but the hidden history of man, mythology, and the mystery Babylon, which is the collective secret society, deep state belief system, all based on the same stuff. Freemasonry is a good example. Kabbalism is a good example. Freemasonry and Judaism are basically the same thing. They admit that, brag about it, actually. But the secret societies all basically stem back to giant worship, demonic communion, and ye shall be as gods. That's basically the path that they take. And they sacrifice babies and do all that adrenochrome bullshit because of these religious beliefs. Now, people often will have a hard time defending that statement. Fake news will come at you like, you believe the deep state are satanic interdimensional vampires. Ha, ha, ha. Yes, not in the interdimensional vampire sense, but in the satanic. Yes, I can prove that they're satanic in their own writings. For example, Theosophy creator, basically, Aleister Crowley, who called himself the B666, was a super cultural icon for many of the elite, and many of them still read his teachings. And people like General Flynn are starting to quote some of his students now in their prayers. You're starting to see the impact, but he was all over the Beatles covers. He wrote poems about dancing with dead children's bodies and having sex magic orgy rituals. By the way, that's where Barbara Bush came from, Aleister Crowley's sex magic orgy rituals. And also Hillary Clinton came from something similar with one of his proteges, Jack Parsons, who gave us the father of rockets, the father of rocket science, basically. Jack Parsons, who had no scientific background whatsoever, was out in the desert doing sex magic rituals to get this information, and then had Hillary Clinton, a moonchild. And you begin to see... you begin to see that before it became Area 51. Yeah.
Right.
Place in the desert. You begin to see now the way that these occult connections play out in the background. And then that is the motivation for all of the evil stuff that they're doing that makes no sense in the foreground. Why would they destroy America?
When you look at it from that perspective, and then you look at, the Freemason or Freemasonic structures in DC, the owl is clear. It's very clear that it's there. And what the mouth of the owl is, what is it on the White House, right? Or Congress, is it? I forget which, or Capitol building, I think it is, or the pentagram and the bottom star. The
always have a pyramid somewhere.
There's no denying it. And I was just watching the video the other day. In fact, I was watching it on the Serapeum. I think it's at the top. It's at the top. There's a video there. Something in plain sight. There's some Freemason videos on the Serapeum. People should check that out because
it's theserapeum.com/rulers is the main page for the secret society, Rulers of Darkness, Freemason stuff.
But there was a video that was just uploaded a couple of days ago. It's on the homepage. It's up at the top. Yeah, I know that. I've gone through that article, but at the top, there are some videos there. And there's a couple that I watched on the Freemasons, and one of them went all through the structures of DC, and I didn't know a lot of it, and I was surprised. So when you say, these are descendants of the Nephilim, who are the deep state, these blood drinking crazy maniacs, well, when you look at the symbolism and you look at the things that they did, well, why would they do that then? Why would they make these structures like this? Why would they put this pentagram there? Why would they make this owl there? Why would the mouth and the beak of the owl be at the doorway to was it the Capitol or the White House or whatever it is? Capitol, I think it is. And then the pentagram and the obelisks. And what's the purpose of it? Why not just have a beautiful brick building? I mean, there's plenty of beautiful buildings in the world. Why does it have to be, why does it have to have all this satanic symbolism? So there's something more there. There is something spiritual there. It's legit. And
God warned us.
It's satanic. It's satanic.
And that's where the culture war, which I call the sin war, because it has a religious agenda and a motive. The culture war, people are used to that term, though. That's where the culture war comes from. It's the sin war from the seed war. It's one of their many attacks, but ultimately they seek to kill us and enslave all of the brown people. That's their plan. That is what they wrote. So, of course, it won't come to pass. God warned us about all this stuff, and God told us what's going to happen at the end. So,
bring it all the way back around. Bring it all the way back around. Everything that we're seeing.
People want to go, if people want to go to the end of the rabbit hole, I have set up a table with a feast and a banquet using your help at the Serapeum and bringing all of these experts together, not just me, but all of these experts together to prove these things that I'm saying. Extraordinary evidence for extraordinary claims. But God warned us about all of this in fine detail.
But bringing it all the way back around on the transgender topic, right, which is what we started off with. So it all comes back down to a seed. That's okay. It all comes back down to the seed war, to the seed of the serpent, all the way back to biblical times, and what we're seeing happen is actual spiritual. And it's not just indoctrination. It's not just, depopulation. It's not just these very superficial reasonings for what they're doing that seem so extraordinary. When you see some of these monsters, when you see some of these monsters, these drag queens that are dressed up like demons with the makeup and the outfits and the horns, and you see them sit there with the children, it's just so demonic and it's so evil. And it's not like, oh, yes, Billy, give the nice lady, put a dollar bill in her scrotum. It's something so much.
Well, if you say any of this, they're going to call you Hitler. It's that simple. Once you connect the dots, they're going to call you a Nazi.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's the go-to. But what does it matter? They're going to say everything because when you see it and you
look at what
DeSantis you point to it, say, hey, look at that. Look at that. Look at it. Nazi.
Well, DeSantis just outlawed Nazi activism in Florida, giving us the strongest hate crime laws in the country. So
Well,
that's where it goes. When you start to tell the truth, they will pull a string and shut you down immediately. When James O'Keefe, who founded Project Veritas, touched one of their lies too closely at the Pfizer thing, they cut him from his own company. Okay. Yeah. They have the power to force parents to sit there while they transify their children in school. That is the power that they have over us for now, but it will come to pass that this fades. I think we've covered most of the topics related to transgenderism. I mean, obviously we have more behind this. I didn't even go into the ISIS stuff. In ancient Sumeria, transgenderism was quite common. In fact, as was, by the way, like 30% of the people in those days would elongate their children's skulls with the board method, using two boards and trying to press their heads as babies.
But transhumanism
to look like the gods.
Transhumanism
itself, and transhumanism as well, with the Nephilim and such.
They had creatures. They had structures of creatures that were half bull and half human, or half horse and human, or bird and human. They had all these things. It's interesting that we're starting to talk about transhumanism now, right? Yuval Noah Harari, he's the transhumanist leader for the WEF. That's so interesting because it's all coming back around full circle.
So Isis was basically, or Semiramis in the Bible, was basically Nimrod's wife. Now, this was a weird relationship. She was also his mother, I think, at the same time. And then she also, I think, married her son, Tammuz, later. I don't remember the details on that. But in essence, this unholy trinity has been what many mythologies have sort of seen as a mirror of Christ's story. The resurrecting and dying sun god, basically, is Nimrod dying and then resurrecting through his son Tammuz, according to the story that Semiramis told after Esau, of all people, cut off Nimrod's head. Now, basically, Nimrod was an evil king tyrant who turned himself into a giant. He started out as a man, interestingly. So he was the transhumanist god king of the New World Order secret society of Freemasonry. He started the modern understanding of secret societies. He brought it back from the pre-flood world. His wife was a chip off the same sort of block. She was evil. She was known as a child sacrifice goddess, a goddess that brothels would give prayer to, so they would have more profits from their whores for the day. There were many prayer tablets to Semiramis and these different names found. But what's important to understand is no matter what the name, Aphrodite, Isis, Semiramis, Baal, Nimrod, all these different, Apollo, all these different names, they came out of the Tower of Babel situation. So all of these mythologies, all of these hundreds of different names all over the world, it's the same people, it's the same stories, it's the same human history. And when you put that all back together, it simplifies, it condenses everything back. It's a very simple story, actually. It's not that complicated. There aren't really that many different versions. There are just different names for the same characters. Now, there's some local, belief systems that spun up off of that, and things sort of evolved locally from that belief system. Because the Tower of Babel situation, they could no longer communicate. You had 72 different versions of the same God King, the same dying and resurrecting figure. So all of these mythologies went out in different languages under different names and basically spread to what we know of as paganism today, all of the different collective mythologies. In essence, though, getting back to the transgender aspect, Isis or Semiramis was a transgender goddess. She was a goddess of sex and love, Aphrodite, but also not love in the romantic sense, love in the carnal sense, love and lust, basically. She was a slut. She was a whore. She was a goddess of whores and sluts. And she also was known, there are prayer tablets of this nature, to perform the first transgender surgeries. She changed her followers from man into woman. She changed herself from woman into man. So this is part of their unholy system. This is their queen. And you would actually see in her priesthoods, you would find transgender priests in her priesthood. So what you're seeing is actually the rise of the spirit of Semiramis in the last age. And you're seeing the rise of the transgender priesthood of this New World Order belief system, which is going to be very anti-Christian and hostile to faith.
All right. Okay,
Does that make sense?
That. Okay, so that's how it ties. Okay, that makes sense to me. because but I see it as it's spiritual. It's not just indoctrination. It's not just, to weaken the military. It's not. It's spiritual, and that kind of connects it in. That kind of ties it into what's going on, and quite literally, it just appears to be evil. Malevolent doesn't appear to be just some people who are genderqueer, who don't, aren't comfortable in their own skin, or, it's none of that. It's none of that. And now, I said before that when you look back and you see how it seems to have been introduced with RuPaul to sort of normalize it to the introduction. Who controls television? Who controls Hollywood? Who controls that? Right?
Riddle me this.
But I mean, it's always them.
Who runs the media and even the news?
Right? And it's the writers and it's the producers and it's and who comes up with the idea? Who comes up with the concept? How did RuPaul just suddenly appear?
And who defends it?
Yeah, no, exactly.
Who defends it in court every time?
How did that just come out of nowhere? How did RuPaul just come out of nowhere and suddenly, here's this, we're glorifying this stuff that, but then you see how it slowly progressed. It slowly progressed to where now they're actually directly going for the children. And these things would have seemed insane 3, 4, 5, not 3, 4, 5, maybe 10 years ago. It would have seemed insane to see what's happening now. And people just accept it. And, you would think that there would be more pushback. I would expect to see more people. I expect to see more people, especially the Christian community, quit being so damn timid about it, about offending people, and speak up. Yeah. Because 10 years ago, you would have spoke up 10 years ago if you had a bunch of pedophile transgender men sexualizing your children before you in their libraries, in their schools, in their classrooms. They're giving the kids porn. They're literal porn, not a half-dressed woman. Literal porn, oral sex, man on man, girl on girl. People need to speak up and they need to quit being timid about it. But it seems like people are under some spell. In my opinion, it seems that people are under some kind of magical spell. And because what would have been completely not so bananas 10 years ago are like, take your bananas out, boys. I mean, now it's like everybody's good with bananas.
So there are things that have to go into understand, like when you're trying to understand the greater story of humanity, and this is kind of a segue into another topic, and I've got this covered on the Serapeum and in the docuseries and in the condensed version, which is 1 hour long. You can't miss it. No evidence, but the story. There are other things you got to understand as well. Not only have they been at war with us throughout most of human history and eating us and dominating us, enslaving us, killing us, poisoning us, corrupting our beliefs, going after our children the whole time. But basically, what has happened throughout the story is God's people kept falling away from God's law, and he quit protecting them. God's rules are very simple. If you don't follow his law, he casts you out, and you're basically going to be enslaved by some other group. And that's pretty much the continual story. God actually sends other kings to enslave his people, to punish them in some cases and put them through slavery. What happened in Egypt?
It's so dogmatic, though, because when all of that has been hidden from humanity, when all of that has been hidden and you can't find it and you don't know where to look, how do you know that you're not following God's laws when you think that you are, you believe that you are, or you're convinced that you are because you do in your mind all of the right things? So, it's one of those things that bothers me.
You have to read it the way,
it bothers me in that way because I know a lot of really good people, and I know Christians that I would say, well, I can't get on board with that. And they'll say, well, you need to get right with God. I didn't know I was wrong with God. I mean, I thought I was good. I've tried to do all the right things, but no, it's not good enough. You don't follow the laws, so people, I think that creates a situation that's not so great. It's very dogmatic,
It creates a wonderful opportunity because it actually gives us our only chance of hope right now. I mean, there are some cultural, indicators that we're going to get a civil war and at some point a revolution, and maybe it'll succeed. But traditionally, God fights for his people if they follow his law, and he protects his people. There is some expectation and precedent for this kind of protection. During the plagues of Exodus in Egypt, when he was raining death and disease all over Egypt, the people in Goshen, where the family of Joseph had settled, the Jacob Israelites had settled, they were untouched. Their cows were fine. They were not sick. They did just fine because they were trying to follow God's law. However, later on, fast forward, after they had quit following God's law a number of times, God's basically going to punish people. And one of the things that he did, and I think it's in Paul, it mentions this, and I'm going to paraphrase off memory. It says, "Beloved, I would not that ye be ignorant of this fact, that forgetfulness has come in part upon Israel until the fullness of the nations come in." Now, basically, the fullness of the nations are coming in right now as the New World Order is decimating them for its one world government. Right. And sure, everybody has had the word of Christ has been preached throughout the whole world, all four corners, which is another biblical reference to a flat earth. But anyway, at this point, the fullness of the nations has come in. The forgetfulness of the actual tribe of Israel is wearing off. Europeans are waking up to the fact that they are the people of the Old Testament, the people of Jacob, Israel, and that their identity has been stolen from them by Edomite demons, Khazarians, Sephardics. Both branches came from Canaan. Both branches came through Canaanites, the giants, and the Hittites, a different tribe of giants, a different tribe of Canaanites later on. They became the Sephardics and the Khazarians through the Idumeans and the Edomites. The time of Jesus, they were called Idumeans or Edomites. The time before that, Edomites. But since then, they've been called other things. They changed their name all the time. In Khazaria, they killed more people than the Black Plague. And then eventually the Russians kicked them out of their country. And that's why they started their long wandering. They're always saying, you should sympathize with us. You should give us money. You should feel bad for us because we've been kicked out of all these different countries. They never mention why.
Yeah, perpetual.
Why have you been kicked out of so many nations? Why have you been wandering for so long? Oh, you have a reputation for eating children and raping them to death in occult rituals. I didn't know this. You've been found guilty in courts of law.
I've heard this before. I don't know what to make of it because I don't know enough about it to be able to comment one with it. I always look at it like, well,
modern facts.
What would be neat is like, I'm the kind of person like, well, show me, not now, obviously that's a whole nother topic, but show me where it is. Show me where it says that. Show me, and not like challenging you, but show me. I want to know.
No, I love it.
People should be willing to know and not just block it out and not say, oh, that's anti-Semitic, I don't want to know, or oh, we need to, feel sorry, or we need to, accept these things that they say. No, we should know.
Well, they call it blood libel.
It's like we shouldn't be afraid to ask. We should know. We should know so you can make an informed decision for yourself. So to say, oh, well, that's anti-Semitic, I don't want to know the reason why Hitler did what he did. What was the reason behind it? Were the communists? Well, who were the communists, right? And then like the Holodomor, why don't they talk about that? Why is it such a taboo to talk about that? When I looked at it, I was like, what?
I'm moving into that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead. So recent history, more
recent
history.
We're way off of transgender now, but I mean that.
After Greece, after Rome, more recent history, they burnt London down twice. They burnt Chicago down once. Both times, skyscrapers owned by Jews popped up afterwards. They were behind the Black Plague. They were behind COVID. They were behind the blood libel situations. Like, for example, St. Simon of Trent, a famous example where a little boy was poked full of holes and drained of blood, being tortured to death for hours by a Jewish group of rabbis. And even renowned scholar, Jewish scholar, by the way, Ariel Toaf, admits this in his book, Bloody Passover in English. I forget how to pronounce it in French, but it's sanguine something.
It wouldn't matter.
Anyway, if you get the English version, yeah. Anyway, it was originally in French, but basically, even they admit it. And then they deny it and call you bad for saying it. So I have articles about this sort of topic, but then fast forward. I don't want to go through 200 different examples of countries that have kicked them out. I have the articles here. You can look that up.
I've seen it.
Fast forward to now.
People should be interested in it.
What happened recently? They have been sort of let loose. They have come to the land of unwalled villages, the prophetic Gog and Magog war is happening, which basically means an enemy coming up from within stealthily within the land of Israel, which are the white nations, the Caucasian nations. So they have come up from within the land of the West, Christian West, in stealth, the land of unwalled villages, where in the 50s, even when I was growing up, people didn't even lock their doors. That's the land of unwalled villages. That's us in the West, the land of opportunity. So they came at us just as prophesied. And basically, the Holocaust was fake. Before that, they took over Russia and killed about 60 to 80 million people. Some people say 7, 13, whatever, but it was a lot more than that. They killed farmers on their farms after basically burning down their crops, shooting their animals, and then shutting down the border, putting up blockades and telling the whole world everything's fine, nothing to see here, nothing to see here. As these people ate their own babies, they were starving to death. The same thing happened was something very similar happened when they convinced the West to attack Germany. We were on the wrong side of that war. The Germans were trying to get the transgenderism out of their schools. They were talking about Jesus and nationalism and good culture. And that was what Hitler was being cheered on for. And then having that fake Holocaust, for which there is literally zero evidence beyond eyewitnesses that got paid thousands of dollars a month for the rest of their life for saying they were victims, all of which are liars, and I'm happy to debate any of them.
Yeah, that's I've seen that. It's very hard. That's a very hard pill for so many people to swallow.
We know how welfare works.
It's
free money. I'm a victim of the Holocaust too. I could use some of that money.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not Jewish and I wasn't there. I wasn't even born yet, but that doesn't seem to matter. For a lot of these stories, they have no basis in reality. One woman survived 11 death camps and 4 gas chambers to be with her husband who survived the nuking of Nagasaki. Bullshit.
Yeah.
Bullshit.
You know, my grandfather used to rant all the time about these kinds of things. And Kennedy, I remember he used to say, it was the Jews, they killed Kennedy because he loved President Kennedy. And my family is Italian, both sides were Italian, Northern Italian. And he was loud and talk with his hands. He would scream in the house about Kennedy and the Jews, and he would be crazy. I didn't know what to make of it, It wasn't until I got older that, I started to see things for myself and understand. And then anytime I would ask questions, it was, oh, it's taboo. You can't talk about that. My mom, oh no, we don't talk about that. That's this and that's this. But why not know? Why not know? And I was always inquisitive like that. I wanted to know, and I wanted to know what my grandfather, who died, and I was never able to ask him what he meant. And I wasn't old enough at the time when he was around to really understand the things that what he would rant about. It was just ranting. But I wish I could have. I wish I could have. Hey, I see a banner on the website you're showing for that red pill. I was like, a red pill. Yeah. There's a lot of people that need that.
Yeah,
that's cool.
I should plug because I never plug anything. I always forget about plugging. We do have an amazing sale going on right now for the red pill. Where's my bottle? My bottle's right here. It's already open. You can see I've already got mine today.
You don't need red pills, Dustin.
Right here. I've already got my red pill in front of me for today. I just haven't taken it yet. But basically, the red pill at redpillliving.com is the world's most powerful antioxidant. We put astaxanthin in there for an extra kick, so it's even more powerful. But it's the world's most powerful antioxidant with the Carbon Shield 60. I mean, the studies behind this, I can't make claims. They'll Roger Stone me at 2 a.m. and kick in my door, maybe shoot my kids or dogs or something. But the studies speak for themselves. Reduce wrinkles. I don't use it on my forehead, but obviously reduce wrinkles are one of the studies when it was used topically. We have hair regrowth in balding men, 17%. We had 90 something percent reduction in acne. I forget. I think it was 96% reduction in acne when it was used topically. And the most famous study of all, which really kind of turned me on to this stuff, was the BAATI study, BAATI, which doubled the lifespan of rats, lab rats that are designed to die of cancer on like day 300 every time, were able to live twice their normal maximum lifespan, healthy, not yellow, not tumorous, no cancer, kept going until they finally just put them down because they were tired of the study. So maybe they would have gone longer than twice their normal maximum lifespan, which is the equivalent of a human living to be 200 years old. It's happened in history. Anyway, this sale ends Sunday, May 7th at midnight Pacific or while supplies last. Use the coupon code REDPILL15 and enjoy your savings. Shop Patriot, detox the deep state. And now kind of back to what we were talking about. they were also basically the Chinese Communist Party. If you go look behind Mao, you had a Jew over his shoulder. They were the founding members of the Chinese Communist Party. They're still pulling the strings. They were Loyola, the first Jesuit, was a Jew, and he basically took over. The Black Pope now runs the Catholic Church. He basically took over Catholicism, and very few people have suffered under Roman occupation and rule in Christianity, which is a false Christianity. No offense to the lay Catholics, more than the Italians. So, just your personal history, you've probably got ancestors that were murdered by them for trying to read the Bible on their own or something like that. That's pretty much a standard family report from under Roman occupation for many, many years, called the Dark Ages. A big part of the Inquisition, the witch hunts, all of that was about rounding up people who read the Bible for themselves. Catholic, they were behind the Catholics, they were behind the Chinese Communist Party, they're behind the Russian Bolshevik Revolution, which led us into the World Wars. And then they set the stage with the Holocaust to be invited in red carpet style to the entire Western world. Within 2 generations, we have been decimated, brought down to slaves in the land our forefathers pioneered, or in some cases conquered. And now we are enslaved to a new world order system in lockstep, killing us just 2 generations later.
It's always
that is the power of the God of this world, as Jesus put it, which is Satan. Jesus only ever
world, right? And that's literal. And that's literal.
Yeah.
So that's the thing. The prince of this world. The Bible tells us, the scriptures lay it all out. It's, people need to accept it, either that it's the word of God, legitimate word of God, or it's some interpretation and you decide. And it can't be.
Yeah.
It's the legitimate word of God. And so when God tells you the prince of this world is Lucifer, is Satan, that's a real thing. And then when you look at people, back on the topic of the transgenders, when you see things like Little Nas X, okay? When you see things like Little Nas X doing his performances, that's legitimately trying to be and not hiding absolute satanic evil. And then you see someone like Sam Smith. Now you look back at Sam Smith. What was Sam Smith a few years ago? Sam Smith was, you could say, was an attractive young man. Seemed to have a lot going for him. What is he now? Sam Smith is
satanic,
transgender, filth, absolute degenerate filth. And he was literally going out of his way to be the most filthy, disgusting looking piece of that you can imagine.
Every Super Bowl halftime show, it's always the same stuff. I think one of the recent Golden Globes was given with a Tower of Babel in the background. I think that might have been the last one, actually. I've got a picture of it somewhere. I don't follow them that closely anymore.
It's literally, they're literally putting it in our faces. They're not hiding it anymore. It's not in the shadows anymore. And people need to get over the fear of admitting it, because, and the way I see it, and maybe I'm just being too pointed in it, but this is legitimate evil marauding around us. And you've laid out a lot of the backstory for why it is and how we got to where we are.
And it's important to understand the way that they win. They're only 2% of the world. They're weak, they're sickly people, and they're not particularly smart or strong anymore. Their IQ is not as high as they claim. That's nepotism, not actual IQ. You can actually look up the studies. They suffer universally almost from Tay-Sachs syndrome, which makes them mentally ill and paranoid as hell. They're always out to get us. That's their attitude. And because historically they've been, guilty of so many atrocities, many examples are testament to that. They've been kicked out of many countries, in some cases lynched or burnt in mass. But now they've done it to the whole world at once. They have nowhere to be kicked out to anymore. If you go back and look at the way that they work strategically, is they come in and they start causing problems and then offer solutions. They start causing racism. For example, And there are many Black leaders who will agree with me on this. For example, probably Kanye West with his recent experience, but Michael Jackson with his lyrics, Jew me, sue me, everybody do me, kick me, kike me, don't you black or white me. All I want to say is they don't really care about us.
Yeah.
Okay. He had a big problem with the Jews for those lyrics. Malcolm X spoke out against the Jewish crocodile tears, as he put it.
Yeah.
There was a Jew behind Rosa Parks on the bus waiting to sue. They put her up to it. There was a team of Jews behind Martin Luther King with his famous speeches. They were waiting in the wings, basically creating
talk about 9/11,
creating wars. Yeah, 9/11 was them.
They were
look up the
celebrating in the streets. I remember seeing that going. I didn't know what to make of it.
They dress up as the towers.
Yeah.
Every year for Purim, their most famous costume is when the women dress up as the Twin Towers with a plane sticking out the side, making fun of us, their victims.
I know, I saw that. I couldn't believe it. And if I didn't see that with my own eyes, I would have never believed it if somebody told me. I would have said, you're just making stuff up to just criticize this group of people. And, don't be a sympathizer,
Yeah. The Nazis in Ukraine, it's them. They have a yarmulke praying at the Wailing Wall in Israel with a swastika tattoo on the back of their neck. I can show you that as well.
That.
Zelensky,
I saw
Putin,
that.
All of them
always on both
putting
sides.
us into a World War III.
Always on both sides.
Well, the point is to kill Christians. They want to kill all the white Christians off in wars, and they make a lot of money from these wars. But right now, the ultimate goal is not money. They're willing to lose money, as we saw with YouTube censorship, losing billions of dollars for Alphabet. The banks are going under. They're willing to lose money to destroy us right now and move us to a new world order system. They think they've got us. And now they're trying to finish their racial enemy, their hated enemy, Israel, the true Israel, which is the Caucasian race entirely. They want to wipe them out. And then they think that they've beaten God, basically. And they think that they're going to get to rule over a one world government. And it's just not going to play out that way. But basically, they have a divide and conquer strategy. They call it, it's in their religious book as a golem. I call it the golem strategy, just to simplify it. But a golem is basically a metaphor for turning someone who's not thinking for themselves into a defender of Jewry. Now, in the story, it's a clay object brought to life by magical powers that kills the rabbi's enemies and eventually gets out of control. You think they'd learn a lesson from that with all the George Floyd stuff they're doing. Yeah. But when you see a George Floyd situation where a man who put a gun to a woman's pregnant belly and robbed her for drugs and then was put down justly and got everything he deserved, absolutely, basically defended and championed by the world, the way that was in order to create and stoke a race war. That is what led to the burning down of American cities with BLM, the burning down of Washington State and Oregon State with Antifa and all those forest fires that they were starting behind firefighter lines with tanks of gas and trucks and chainsaws and stuff, trying to get the firefighters killed. Ignore all of the organized examples of this. Antifa is nothing but a paramilitary made up of Jewish children whose parents work for the government in almost all cases.
Yeah, I've seen that's why they don't go to jail. I didn't believe that. I was told that, a couple of years ago during the riots, and I didn't believe it. I was like, I don't know, man. That just seems like kind of far out there. They could just be just liberal kids, they're just kids, and then it's like, wow, and even for people who, like myself, you think, I know a lot about truth. I, been blah, blah, blah. And then, you're faced with something that now I just accept it, basically okay, so everything is true until proven otherwise. The conspiracy theories are, to me, they're all true. Every one of them. In fact, if you're going to tell me one, just know that I agree with you 100%. It's 100% true. And until someone can prove that it's not, that's where I'm at. And I think it's just a good policy. After the last 3 years, I'm good. I'm good with it.
Being a contrarian has done well for me in life. I tend to fall right on the political issues generally.
I think it's more fun that way. It's more interesting. I find it more interesting.
Their chief rabbi calls Black people monkeys and Cushi, which is a racist term for basically nigger in Hebrew, or Yiddish. Basically, is basically saying nigger in Yiddish. They hate Blacks too, and they were most of the slave owners, over 80% of the ships. And and most of the slave trade. And they were most of the atrocities that were so-called white people in America against blacks were them. But
Wow.
they've turned it into a white supremacy thing. White people don't have any power in this country. And this is basically how media works. They will focus in on whatever example they can get. They'll sit on a pile of dead white babies in order to find one black baby that was hurt, maybe by a white person. Maybe they'll just say it was a white person, because they usually, like, for example, the YouTube shooter. Do you remember the YouTube shooter who was Arab? They gave her green eyes and dark and light hair. They changed her skin color, her eye color, and her hair tone in order to make her look white, in order to demonize white people more, even though she was an Arab mass shooter. This is the kind of stuff that they do every single time.
Well, I mean, we're seeing it.
There's Rosa Parks and Martin Luther King Jr. with their Jewish lawyers starting problems that were not there before.
Wow.
Not heroes, but actual problem creators who then offer solutions.
This is the good part, where you can actually back it up and show it, because it's not just making a claim that, then people can say one thing or another or call it anti-Semitism. It's just the go-to phrase, but when you can back it up with historical fact, that's what, it shows it. You have to show it. You have to be able to show it. But, we see what you're describing today. I mean, there's so many instances where we're seeing white kids getting beat up, and it's always the same. It seems to be the same denominator. It's just this constant.
So when I started down this path and tried to figure out why they're into the child sacrifice and all the blood and all the ritual and all the occult stuff, and I tried to figure out, and I thought it was maybe some sort of mutually assured blackmail, kind of like when the mafia would go kill people together. Yeah. Maybe that's why they're raping kids and killing kids and doing stuff. But then you get into their writings and over history, occult stuff. They believe in these spirits. They believe that they are communing with demonic spirits. So I started looking into it. Turns out they are worshiping these Nephilim and these giants from the pre-flood world. And it's this whole Mystery Babylon occult system.
Wow.
Of trying to be like them, trying to be the transhuman, yes, ye shall be as gods, but also trying to resurrect them and bring back their one world government, one world religion kingdom. If you want to know what happens next, though, I got some clues on this from the Bible. Because I was an atheist my whole life, I started to study this topic, the deep state, what they're into, why they're hurting kids, where all of this stuff is coming from, why the motive, what's the motive, what's the agenda. I started studying all this. Eventually, the last thing I looked at basically was the Bible, and the book of Genesis and the rest of it basically puts together the final pieces of the puzzle for me. And then I started to believe in God. Biblical earth hit me like a brick upside the head, and then I knew God was real. So I had to figure out, well, which God is real? I tested the various holy books, and this book, the Bible of the Christian God, Yahweh, is provable, testable, and verifiable. Not only did it get everything right in terms of the scientism and the science, science versus God, God wins in a big way, but also it has these divine codes that are way beyond the human ability to do. It has prophecies that came true hundreds of years apart with fine detail, predictions that no human could have gotten right, blind prophecies where they had no idea what was going to happen or what it even meant at the time that they spoke it. So it wasn't like a pre-planned powerful thing where they were just part of the agenda, right? They weren't part of the secret societies predicting the future. They didn't know what was going to happen. This was a blind prophecy, like the stuff with Daniel.
Yeah,
and then we see that play out
beyond anything that could have been really conceivable, reasonably conceivable.
Yes,
it was really just exotic to the
mathematically
prophecies were exotic
odds
for the people who were claiming them.
Yes, and blind prophecies and mathematically impossible for all of these prophecies to come true. So that led me to a belief in prophecy. Now, eschatology is kind of a dead science, but even Newton himself said about the times of the end, a group of men will be raised up that will insist upon the literal interpretation of the prophecy that he was obsessed with, by the way. They were obsessed with prophecy. He was a big studier of prophecy. And he says this body of men will insist on the literal interpretation of prophecy. This is the guy who so-called basically invented gravity, Isaac Newton. Everybody remembers him. He's a big science guy.
Newtonian.
He also wrote thousands of pages on alchemy, and he was obsessed with the occult and the prophecies and died drinking mercury. Anyway, that guy also verified what I'm doing now. basically. He predicted me and others like me who will insist upon the literal interpretation of these prophecies. Doing so, you can verify they're real. And there's a few that haven't happened yet, but we have a pretty good trust factor built up over all of the many prophecies that did happen. So if you skip to the end of the Bible or other parts that talk about the end times, you're going to get certain clues. It's going to be like the days of Noah, for example, with genetic corruption and all flesh being corrupted and sin abounding, with technology abounding, and all the thoughts of men continually evil all the time, basically, as in the days of Noah. Those were the defining traits, because evil is pretty common throughout history. Even widespread evil is pretty common throughout history. But never before or after has the entire world been genetically corrupted and all flesh became corrupted until the mRNA vaccine. Now we have a new breed of Nephilim dying hybrids, basically. They're not super soldiers. They're not giants. They're just dying because of the vaccine. Yeah. It has changed who they are. The mark of the beast. It fulfills every criteria, including being in your hand and your forehead. I did that backwards, hand and forehead genetically, including being in your DNA, including taking God's name off your DNA, including a double versus triple helix. You get a third helix added to your DNA. But
this is something that's hard for a lot of people, because there are so many good people, so many good Christians that got vaccinated or got jabbed and boosted for a job or something, and they hear these things that you're saying, and they're like, "I'm corrupted flesh."
You say good Christians.
Well, but
you say good Christians, and I think they are good people who identify as Christians, but most of them were not good Christians, and they did not study the word of Christ. They did not study the prophecies or the Bible. Therefore, they got caught. They got tricked. Maybe
they didn't know. But there's a lot of people that wouldn't know where to find that information. Wouldn't know where to find that. It's been hidden. It's been removed. It's been hidden and cleansed from the books and the history and the records. Unless you really dive deep, like you do, and who has the time unless you're a serious researcher on these things, like you are.
I know.
Who has the time? Because they got to work. They got to go to work. They got to feed their kids. They got to do a thing. And now I got to get this thing in my arm because I got to feed my kids. I got bills to pay. I got car payment, house payment. What's going to happen? Okay. Just one, right? Okay. Just one.
My
they
get
people, one, and then they get two.
People perish for lack of knowledge.
I know, but
my people perish.
I know,
for lack of knowledge.
I know, but it's really hard.
It's a sad thing, and it's a tragedy, and it's a great evil, and that's another testament against these demons.
I think
what they have done is beyond the pale.
I think it's important.
It involves eternal damnation. What they have done.
I think it's important. I think it's important for myself to have a little bit more compassion in how I view it. And I know, and it's not easy, because there'll be people who say, well, it's just too bad. You can have all the compassion you want, but it doesn't change the facts. This is God's law. This is what it says. There's people that are in one of the chats you have that are that way, and they're just like, wow, man, I don't even know what freaking universe.
We have to ask this question. I have a question then. And this was a hard question for me to answer, and I had to be honest about it with myself and come to this conclusion. And it wasn't a lack of compassion. I mean, I'm a compassionate person.
Yeah, I know.
Why did God kill the Nephilim babies? When he said, leave nothing alive,
so
he told the 12 tribes, go wipe out all of those groups.
People like to say that, oh, well, Jesus was very compassionate and God's very compassionate. Hey, man, he carried a whip. He was butch. Jesus was butch. Man, he'd tear you up.
I came not to bring peace, but the sword. Yeah. God says, hate evil. Jesus said, I came not to bring peace, but the sword.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Jesus was a warrior. He only died by choice. He could have called a legion of angels to save him, but he died to fulfill prophecy in order that we might be brought back to God's law through his redemptive act. Just like if you had a friend that jumped out in front of traffic and pushed you out of the way and he died, you'd never forget that act. Jesus did that for us.
Have you never heard of the wrath of God? It's not the wrath of God. Understand what that means?
Yeah. So there is a wrath part, which is coming, and that's kind of where I was getting with the point I was making with prophecy. I didn't want to bash people who took the mark. Maybe you can come back from that. Maybe you can get redemption, but you will die. You will get the the bowls of wrath.
I hope not.
That is what God
I hope
said.
I hope it's not that. I hope it's not like that. For
If
many
God,
people.
so what God says is basically, as I understand it, if you take the vaccine, you get the bowls of wrath of tribulation, which is going to be all of the boils and all of the death and all of the sickness and all of the famine. And
I'm
all of the bad
hoping
stuff.
that it was a failed trial for what they really wanted to do, and they weren't able to get to the next phase, which was actually the mark of the beast and the real deal. But they failed, and they weren't able to get through to it. I like to believe that. I like to believe that it didn't actually fully fulfill, because they didn't know, and there was no test. I want to believe that, because
technically it's not done yet. So this is the vision of Obadiah. He was a minor prophet of God. Many people don't know who Obadiah was, but this is what the Lord God Yahweh has to say about Edom, which are every Jew on earth, basically. We have heard a message from Yahweh. A messenger has been sent among the nations saying, attack, let's go attack Edom. Yahweh speaks to the Edomites and says, soon I will make you the smallest of nations, and you will be greatly hated by everyone. We've seen that already happen. Who else is a smaller tribe of people, less than 2%, and who else is hated like they are? The book of Obadiah basically foretells of people waking up. It foretells of the sleeping giant waking up in the Great Awakening. It foretells of Edom's impersonation and utter destruction, and that God will use Jacob and Joseph, which means the Caucasian tribes that became Europe and America and Australia and Canada and so forth, and Britain, to do this. So you'll see the tribes that they've been trying to kill, wipe out, indoctrinate, eat the babies, all this other stuff, wake up. And then this happens. In Obadiah 1, behold, I have made thee small among the heathen, thou art greatly despised. The pride of thine heart hath deceived thee, thou that dwellest in the clefts of the rock, whose habitation is high, that saith in his heart, who shall bring me down to the ground? Though thou exaltest thyself as the eagle, and we have a lot of eagles today, and though thou set thy nest among the stars, then will I bring thee down. Obadiah 17 to 21, 13 and 18 are the relevant parts. I'm just going to go through these, not in particular order. So 17 to 21 speaks of the final disposition of any remaining Jews in the house of Esau, which is Edom, and the restoration of the kingdom of Israel in Acts 1 to 6 mentioned. So we see at the end of the age, at the end of time, in the final battle, Esau, Edom, is in a position of strength. Okay, this is important context. Just like we see in the Gog and Magog stuff, I have a different article on that and what they've done to us over history and why. Obadiah 13 says, you should not have entered the gate of my people in the day of their calamity. Yeah, you should not have looked on their affliction in the day of their calamity, nor have laid hands on their substance in the day of their calamity. And then Obadiah 18, which is the operative part. And the house of Jacob shall be a fire, and the house of Joseph a flame, and the house of Esau, the Edomites, for stubble, and they shall kindle in them and devour them, and there shall not be any remaining of the house of Esau, for Yahweh has spoken it. So that is what's coming next. Not me, it's God saying it.
Wow. What
this war has been playing out. And, remember, Amalek and Edom are related, and God has promised a war with Amalek every generation. That means every generation there is a war, a battle that continues.
Wow.
And people refuse to see.
Yeah. And people who should not have a problem seeing it. There's too many of them. There's too many people that believe so strongly in their Bibles and their books and their stories, yeah. and they can't handle the hard truths. So, well, a lot has to change, but hopefully, I just like to hope that it's not as serious as it seems. I mean, but I like to have. I have hope. I have hope. I have hope. I have hope that there's enough good people. And I believe that we win this. I believe that we overcome the evil and we win.
A remnant will. But many people will be deceived by the great deceptions, which is scientism, false science leading us away from God. Many people will be deceived by the world ruler, the leader that basically comes as a false savior and tricks us into accepting the Noahide laws and outlawing Christianity and starts beheading Christians. And many people will fall for this false prophet with the one world religion that we're seeing, Chrislam and the Pope. Any hints there? There's a lot of stuff that's now playing out as it relates to the end times. For those who have eyes to see and ears to hear, you can go to theserapium.com/HisStory with 2 S's. God's story, his story, man's story. Also the serpent story and Christ's story all in one. It's his story. So theserapium.com/HisStory has the condensed 1-hour version of everything from Adam and Eve to the vaccines and beyond. And it also has the Acts 1 through 15, like 200-hour plus ancient alien History Channel style documentary series with truth rather than aliens every 20 minutes. It's like they pop up a bunch of random information. It's aliens did it every time. Nope. It was the Nephilim and the fallen angels. But so they prove everything else that I'm talking about. Giants,
the webpage that you're showing. The web pages you're showing is so funny in that sense, is because there's an advertisement for the red pill and then history. So first take your red pill, then go here and watch this, and everything will be better.
You might need the extra energy. I would suggest bringing some red pill and some like dark to light mental focus from red pill living before you go into this documentary.
Food and water. I know this is the history. This is the docu-series. You need food and water, blankets, be prepared.
Yeah.
You'll come out, you're a guy, you'll come out looking like Moses in a couple of weeks because you haven't shaved.
And bring late teenagers are fine to watch this. There's a few places where little kids maybe shouldn't see some of the evil stuff that's happening today, like Act 11 and Act 13 are pretty rough historically. There's a lot of graphic images in there. There's like a breakdown of how they sacrifice babies and stuff. But mostly this video was meant as a way to educate even children on the true history, the true science, the true theology, the truth in media, the truth in news, the truth of all of it, all of the hidden history. And I built this for my kids, not for you guys, but I'm sharing it with you guys because it's important and people need to know this. But this is what I'm going to use to teach my children the hidden history of the world. This docuseries is what I built specifically because I was having a heart attack and I thought this stuff might not survive until they're old enough for me to teach them. So this is my legacy to my children. This is my magnum opus to the world. My great work. This is the best thing I've ever done, and I'll never do anything better than this unless I just tell the same story in a better way, because this story is our story. And I'm nobody. I'm just a non-person who tried knocking my stuff over. I'm just an anonymous person who tried to make a difference and help create a piece of this great awakening and bring people to the truth. And I've been destroyed for it. I've lost, millions of dollars of income. I've lost multiple businesses. My family and I are basically living in poverty or close to it. And we used to be famous and rich YouTubers. I used to have all kinds of attention, media, and everything else, but I told the truth. And that's what I'm doing still. So I hope people will share this. Shop Patriot with our sponsors, redpillliving.com, thegreatawakeningcoffee.com. Support us if you can, if it's not a burden. Donate, whatever it takes. Help get the word out. Share the links. Spread the message. Time is short. This is already illegal in Ireland. This is being made illegal in Canada and parts of the EU. It's being made illegal in Florida by DeSantis, who has now signed Nazi hate crime laws, which have no definition of Nazi. So we know exactly what it will be used for and who it will be used against. So I'll either be arrested soon or have to flee my home and hide out in a cave and upload my videos by thumb drive and carrier pigeon. So let's hope that we don't get that far.
We'll find you in a cave somewhere.
Yeah, look for me on the mountains. I'll be somewhere with a big beard and a staff walking around.
I stand on the mountain before you.
That's my last.
As long as you're not in a loincloth, we're good. Dustin, it's cool, man. It's always cool talking to you, man. I look forward to talking about more. There's so much more to talk about. Like, there's really a lot more. We were talking a while back, and it's about Gaddafi. That would be something interesting to talk about because there's so many people don't know what he did.
A good man.
Yeah, what he did.
Good man who tried to bring back gold.
River. That would be cool. We should maybe think about finding some time to talk about that. Maybe next time.
Hillary Clinton. We killed him after the soldiers shoved a bayonet up his ass and raped him to death.
Whore of Babylon.
Excuse me. Sorry.
Perfect for her.
It makes me emotional sometimes, and I get angry and I use the wrong words, but
people don't know what he did, though.
Stood up for his people.
People don't know what he did. And when they find out what the U.S., what NATO did, but what
He was an Arab Hitler.
Man-made river. If you have not heard about Gaddafi and the man-made river, look into it. And I hope we can talk about
the gold standard even more. Yeah, he tried to bring back the gold standard. That's why they took him out. And he was living in a tent, giving his wealth to the people. This man was
free education.
He was like the Arab Hitler.
Right, free education. He was growing organic farms. If you wanted to work on a farm, he would give you the money to start the farm. He would give you the land. He would give you the water supply, everything. You were provided with everything, and give you money to start it organic. But you had to grow organic. It was amazing. But we should talk about that sometime. That's a lot.
Yeah.
For now, okay. I think we covered a lot.
You need to go to sleep. It's late where you
man.
are. Opposite side of the world. So, I'm going to let you get some sleep. Thank you guys for watching this. We'll probably turn this into 2 or 3 different episodes. We cover different topics. We can cut it on transgender. We can go into the other one. Anyway, thank you all. Share the links. We love you and good luck. We are in the tribulation, or we're like right before it. The season of open persecution is coming. So for those who understand what that means, we're living in the days of Noah once again. See you guys on the next one.